You meet someone at a party, shake their hand, repeat their name out loud like you're supposed to, and 30 minutes later, you're introducing them to someone else as my friend, you two should meet. Gone. Not faded, not fuzzy, just gone. Like it was never there at all. You're not lazy, you're not disinterested, but there is something genuinely strange happening in your brain that almost nobody ever explains properly. Let's start with the question that actually matters. Why does a name specifically disappear when you can still describe someone's entire outfit, their accent, and the exact story they told about their dog? Here's what cognitive scientists discovered, and it has a name of its own. It's called the Baker/Baker paradox. Psychologist Gary Cohen ran an experiment where he showed people the same photograph of a face, but told half of them the man's occupation was Baker, and told the other half his last name was Baker. Same word, same sound, same letters. The people told he was a baker remembered it far more often than the people told his name was Baker. Think about that for a second. Identical word, wildly different memory outcome, just because of what category the brain filed it under. The word baker connects to an entire web of meaning: flour, ovens, bread, a job, a life. The word baker as a surname connects to nothing. It's just a sound attached to a face with no deeper structure behind it. Your brain treats proper names as a fundamentally different kind of information than almost anything else you learn. But here's where it gets more interesting. Names aren't just meaningless. They're also structurally isolated in how your brain actually stores memory. Quick pause. I recently launched this channel to explore human psychology, behavior, and the hidden mechanisms behind social interactions. We're still at the very beginning, so every subscription really means a lot. If this kind of content helps you better understand people and the way the human mind works, consider subscribing. It really helps me continue and create even more in-depth videos. Thank you, and let's continue. Neuroscientists studying the hippocampus, the brain's memory binding center, have found that connecting a face to a name requires something called associative binding, essentially welding two completely unrelated pieces of information together into a single unit. Your brain is extremely good at recognizing faces. Facial recognition draws on ancient, highly specialized neural circuitry that's been refined over millions of years of evolution. Recognizing a face doesn't require effort. It happens almost instantly and automatically. Attaching an arbitrary sound to that face is a completely different task, and a much newer one in evolutionary terms. There was no survival advantage in tracking spoken names for most of human history. Faces mattered. Sounds attached to those faces as formal labels are, cognitively speaking, a relatively recent invention. This is why there's a well-documented condition on the opposite extreme that reveals just how separate these two systems really are. It's called prosopagnosia, face blindness. People with this condition can often still remember a person's name, their voice, their personality, everything except the actual visual structure of their face. It's proof that face recognition and name recall run on almost entirely separate neural tracks. When one system fails, the other can remain completely intact. Now, here's something that will genuinely surprise you. Forgetting names gets measurably worse with something most people never suspect: poor sleep the night before. Memory consolidation, the process where new information gets transferred from short-term storage into something more permanent, happens largely during sleep, specifically during certain stages tied to memory replay in the hippocampus. Researchers studying sleep and memory have found that even mild sleep deprivation significantly impairs the brain's ability to encode new associative information, and name-face binding is one of the most associative tasks your brain ever performs. So if you met someone at a conference after a rough night's sleep, your brain wasn't being careless. It genuinely didn't have the neural resources available to properly weld that name to that face in the first place. But let's be honest about something else. There's also a phonological problem hiding underneath all of this. Names often don't follow normal language rules. A common word like baker fits neatly into existing patterns your brain already recognizes. But a name like Kowalski or Osei or Fitzgerald has to be processed almost like a brand new invented word every single time, at least until you've heard it enough times for it to become familiar. Linguists refer to this as phonological novelty. Unfamiliar sound patterns require significantly more processing effort to store, and that effort competes directly with everything else your brain is doing during a first meeting: reading tone, managing eye contact, thinking of what to say next. There's also a biological dimension worth understanding here. Research on aging and memory has consistently found that name recall specifically, more than almost any other type of memory, declines earlier and more noticeably with age. Researchers believe this happens because proper name retrieval relies on a very narrow, very specific neural pathway, with none of the redundant backup routes that more meaningful information gets. If that one narrow pathway weakens even slightly, the name simply doesn't come through, even when everything else about the person remains perfectly clear in memory. So, what does all of this mean for you? If you forget names constantly, your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's treating proper names exactly the way decades of research shows almost every human brain treats them: as isolated, meaningless, structurally fragile information competing against a nervous system built to prioritize faces, emotion, and context instead. The fix isn't trying harder in the moment. The fix is working with how memory actually functions. Turn the name into something meaningful, the way Cohen's baker was meaningful. Picture Kowalski adjusting a bow tie. Picture Osei standing beside a tree with the same first letter. Give the brain a category to file it under instead of a bare sound floating in space. And if the name has already slipped away mid-conversation, just ask again, directly, warmly. You're not exposing a flaw. You're working around a genuinely well-documented limitation of how human memory is built. Because here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. Forgetting someone's name isn't a measure of how much you value them. It's a measure of how differently your brain treats a meaningless sound compared to everything else about a person that actually matters. And honestly, that's not the worst thing in the world. If this explains something you've been quietly embarrassed about for years, do me a favor and subscribe to Think Within. There are people out there right now who need this explained to them too, and that subscribe button is how they find it.